Playing Bigger, Playing Beautiful, the heart-centered way, where entrepreneurship meets spirituality, explores the intersection of personal fulfillment, spiritual growth, and business success. This podcast delves into the idea that entrepreneurship isn't just about profits or growing small to medium-sized businesses. It's also about embracing purpose, meaning, and inner growth. Each episode features conversations with entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and spiritual practitioners who share their journeys of building businesses that align with their highest values and deepest callings.
I'm your host, Debbie Zita, best-selling author, meditation guide, Australia's leading heart-centered success coach, creator of the 6 Selves model of self-inquiry, and founder of the Heart-Centered Way, dedicated to helping heart-centered humans cultivate more time, energy, money, and wisdom.
Welcome, beautiful Martina. Thank you so much for being here with us. Can you please let the audience know who you are and what it is that you do?
Thank you for having me here, Debbie. It's a real honor to be here with you. So my name's Martina Hughes, and I'm an intimacy and relationship mentor. So I work with individuals and couples to support them to discover the quality of intimacy, relationship, sexuality, desire, to be able to discover and embody the quality of that they've always longed for or craved and haven't known how to create. What I've discovered in my journey, and my husband and I in our shared journey, is that so few people have the tools to really create something powerful in their relationships. So there's a lot of people suffering and struggling in the world of intimacy and relationships. And we use tools of sacred intimacy to help people be able to make a difference in their lives.
Oh, such a beautiful way of expressing what you do, and also such important work, because I think that the world really needs to be able to have soft spaces, safe spaces, people who understand this work, people who work with a deep level of authenticity. And also, especially for me, what's important and why I was so excited to do this podcast with you is I've been watching you, I think since 2012. I actually had one session with you, just very brief, but it always stayed with me, the level of integrity that you work from, and then just sort of witnessing you over this, over a decade now, and just seeing how you've evolved and blossomed in your business and, as a human. And so, having that level of integrity out in the world in this space is very much needed. So thank you to you and your husband for doing what you do. I would love to find out, can you share with the audience and myself, what were the early stages of your entrepreneurship journey, particularly with this space that you find yourself working in?
So my background was as a chartered accountant, and so massive leap to have made. And back when I was a chartered accountant, I always said that I would never have my own business because I saw how much people in small businesses were struggling. And then when I started my own journey of personal development, and that went through a series of different trainings of breath work and rebirthing and shiatsu and yoga and a whole variety of things I was exploring at the time. And at a certain point, I went, I'm called to be of service to people. I'm called to work with people with these healing and transformative arts. And there's nobody who's going to hire me for a job in that space. It was like this calling that was waking me up from the inside. I all of a sudden, it dawned on me that if I really wanted to work with people in this way, I needed to become self-employed.
It's a big realization, that one, isn't it? When you have that longing and that calling. And I don't know about you, Martina, but I actually pushed that down for a while because it felt way too daunting. And but the more that I did that, the more it would just kind of come up, and I would just be meeting so many entrepreneurs and spiritually minded people and going, no, I don't want either of those things. I'm a mum, just normal stuff. But it didn't matter where I went. it was just there, or there was a book or a movie or something was just there calling me. And eventually I had to just say yes to that call. Yeah.
Yeah, I lived with a foot in both worlds for a period of time, doing some finance manager work for a few years whilst I was seeing a few clients on the side.
Yeah.
But even during that period, it felt so painful because I was ignoring that deeper calling, and it felt as though I was cutting off parts of myself to operate in the finance world. And that every time I was immersed in working with clients,
Mm.
my body, my heart would just be like, ah, this is where I long to be. This is where I come alive. And it's what my being is called to do.
Yeah, I thank you for sharing it. We had an interview. I had an interview a couple of days ago with a guest who was talking about, from that business angle and how it's quite important for us to actually have, whether it's savings or a part-time job or a casual job or something, because there's very few of us that can really just go, okay, leap of faith, I quit and here I am. Which is actually something that in a way I did, but it was also after so many years of doing the work behind the scenes and really kind of resisting it. And then life just kind of gave me a here you go, just do it.
Mm.
But that's almost, perhaps that was also wise decision making to have, a foot in each camp from a human perspective.
Yes,
But then spiritually speaking, I can imagine that kind of almost being like in two worlds where it's just, oh, I'm here, but I'm here and I so want to be on this side. Um,
yes.
can you share with us how did you sort of, make that switch over, eventually to this is what you do? Like, did it take you months and years? Was there a methodology or a process that you used or a practice? How did you do it?
Mm. So it was really a process of listening to my body. So at a certain point, I was offered an opportunity in the finance world, which would have required me to commit to full-time work, which then would have meant very little time for my passion and my purpose. And so when I was faced with that opportunity and I sat with it, and it was quite a good financial offer, but really sitting with it and going, no, that's not where my heart is. I would feel like I was dying a little bit to pursue that path. So very much listening to my body. And then at the point where I made the decision to fully quit from that work, all of a sudden things unfolded for me. I remember sitting in front of my heater one night. It's back when I lived in Sydney, but I remember sitting in front of my heater one night with some big pieces of paper and colored pens. And all of a sudden I was writing out all these events that I wanted to run. It was like, oh yeah, okay. So there's sacred sexuality for women, which I had already started, but then all of a sudden I saw this pathway to offering that every second month. Then there was a new event called Tantric Nights. So I could run that every month. And I could also go and run it in Melbourne. And then I could create these retreats and these one-day events. So it's almost as though the energy had been building and building within me. And then the process of making that final decision to say no to my security blanket, all of a sudden, inspiration, energy, life just kind of rushed through me onto the piece of paper. And then within a week, I'm promoting new events and bookings just coming in. So very much a leap of faith.
Oh, isn't it just the best feeling?
Mm-hmm,
The
mm-hmm.
universe matches you and you have that alignment and that desire and anyone listening, whether you're in like an amazing quarter or month or you're in a bit of a lull, hang in there because it does also go, I'm sure you'll agree, but it goes in cycles as well. And I often find that it's quite quiet, or I'm upgrading or going through something just before there's like another big kind of, wave of clients coming through, or the next level of income coming through, or level of activation or healing or awareness for myself that I then would use, obviously for myself, but then also for my clients. It's so special. And I love also, now, 6 years into this this role that I'm in, but being able to surround myself with people such as yourself who are, on similar paths, and we can kind of support each other and remind each other, because it is just so different when you're working for an employer, you're working for a corporation. And then also it's also quite different when you're running an energy or a spiritual or a service impact based business as well. So having that mix of people around is, I think, critical for us to thrive, really.
Yes, definitely. And I like what you say about the cycles, because those cycles very much align with what I've experienced and I've seen in others. It's like if I'm going through something significant, a big life transition, or something's changing how I'm perceiving what I'm offering, and then all of a sudden that's like, oh, teachings need to shift to somewhere else. And
Yes.
so things will kind of quieten down whilst I'm in that shift. And then as I emerge on the other side, it blossoms and opens again.
Yeah. And it makes sense, right? Like it makes perfect sense. It's we can use the analogy of the chrysalis and the butterfly, or the lotus flower in the mud and then opening up. It's part of what sort of has to happen to clean out all of that. And yeah, trusting that process, which can sometimes feel as a human remarkably uncomfortable. And I think as a spirit, if we can tap into that energy, it's quite remarkable and quite beautiful, the expansion that happens in those spaces. Can you tell us, Martina, how do you, or do you have to navigate in what you do, the privacy and the sacredness and the vulnerability, or maybe even the taboo that might come with this type of work, because it is so sort of private to people? Does that still happen in your circles?
Yes, so I guess there's a few layers to what you've just asked, and that is, I can be somewhere and meet people in a general social setting. Say, for example, I went on a group hike on the weekend, and when people ask what I do, and I say I'm an intimacy and relationship coach, in that kind of setting, sometimes it's just like, oh, okay. And that's the end of the conversation, because people are still nervous in talking about intimacy and relationship, nervous to go, well, what does that mean? And because people are still frightened to speak about sex, it's such a paradox really in our world, because sex is everywhere in media and social media and advertising. But on the other hand, nobody ever truly talks about what sexual intimacy is, what it means when two people connect deeply and profoundly, how it feels when there's a certain kind of union between two people. So sex is kind of out there, but it's very much only the superficial, shiny layer, and not that deep, profound healing and transformative experience that it can be when engaged in consciously and lovingly.
That's a beautiful sharing. A lot of our listeners, or a majority of our listeners, will be 40 and over, and that includes myself. Can you share with us, how does sex and intimacy naturally change, as we move through 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond?
Mm. My experience is that it deepens and becomes richer. However, it does require the willingness to be vulnerable and do the work required to open, particularly for women. And this often looks different for women than for men. So I'll speak to women first of all. What can happen is that many times a woman has not opened to the full depths of what's available sexually. And when she's never opened to those full depths of what's available sexually, as life goes on, it becomes harder and harder for her to open up sexually. There can be a sense of like, oh, it takes this much effort to open, and I only really enjoy it like this much. What's the point? And so I see lots of women that give up on sexual intimacy, and often because their reasoning, maybe they're too busy, there's too much going on with the family, they have health issues, they may have perimenopause, changing bodies, all of those things. But in actual fact, what I see when I work with those women is that they've never known how to truly open, sensually, sexually, to feel the full range of what's possible. So at a certain point, they just gave up because it seemed too hard. And they've most likely been with partners who also haven't had the tools for them to be able to open. And so in this way, it's no one's fault. It's just that in our society, we don't have the tools, the training, the capacity commonly made available to know what is it that really opens a woman's body. What is it that has a woman be able to touch that place inside of her where she experiences spiritual and sexual ecstasy, the place where she dissolves the ego, the boundaries, the identity, and she's left as a vibrating, luscious, ecstatic vibration.
So good.
If women have never known how to open themselves and men have never known how to open women in that way, it makes sense that after years of longing, disappointment, for some women, the experience of opening starts to feel just too hard, too much.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's there's an effort and then you get to a point where it's just, okay, too hard basket. It's obviously not for me. I'll close that down, which seems, in a way, for me, it seems quite heartbreaking. I mean, I don't know if this is a star sign thing or a personality thing. And I'm also mindful of, sharing on the podcast versus sharing when we talk. But, for me, a life without knowing myself in that way, I couldn't. It would seem like I'm just missing out on such a huge piece of myself. Especially, I think, being an energetic woman and a very spiritual woman, it was always so important for me to understand that piece of the puzzle and be able to know what it feels like to tap into that place. So I'm hoping that, it's never too late if there's, people like you around and, whether you're, 50s, 60s and beyond, and whether you're on your own or you're partnered, but if you're perhaps listening to this now and wondering maybe that's something that I could and should explore, that there is an option for people to do such things. The other thing I want to ask you is, is there a way that we can do it, safely and not have it be misused? Because unfortunately, there is a seduction or a power when sometimes people have access to the tools, and that's one of the things I do want to ask you, is because I think I know some of what they are, although it's not what I do for work, but I certainly touch on it through activation sessions and have been on my own journey of inquiring around, the body and my own body and what feels lovely and what is soulful versus what is just the body versus what is the heart and all of those things. But so two questions. First one is, how can we protect ourselves and make sure that we're doing things that feel safe for us?
Yeah, definitely. It's so important to listen to our bodies and to listen even beyond the familiar and the known, because there's a certain familiar and known capacity of our body that's our habits, that's our routine. I'm this kind of person, I'm that kind of person, this is what I do. But then underneath those habits, the routines, the identities, there's our longing, our vulnerability. But then also with the longing and the vulnerability, it's important to engage our discernment. So if we're meeting, whether it's a potential partner or potential teacher in this space, to really listen beyond the shiny things, listen beyond the comfortable things that we want to hear. It's like, what is it if we sit in our womb and really listen from inside of our body? Does our body open and expand, or is it contracting? And it can be difficult, particularly for women, when it comes to romantic relationships, intimate situations, because as women, we are love-driven beings. So, that often means that as love-driven beings, we will make choices for love that can compromise ourselves. Oh, this feels good. I don't want to miss out on this opportunity for love, for connection, for closeness, because as a love-driven being, we will prioritize feelings of closeness, connection, intimacy above all else. But sometimes we do that with a significant cost, which I know I've certainly been down some painful places in my own journey where I was lured in by the shiny things, lured in by hearing what I wanted to hear. And if I'd really had the access to listen more deeply, I would have heard the warnings at the time.
Yeah, and unfortunately, and I know we connected on this, and I'll touch on it briefly, but I've had similar experiences. It was a big part of my journey, and only been able to talk about it in recent years because it was it was many years, and to me, it was the truth because I didn't want to see it in any other way until I was ready to see it. But what was interesting was, there was so much opening and beauty and what I felt was love. And I'm wondering, and I know there are so many women that go through this. This has been a hot topic, maybe because I'm ready, but it's like every day, every conversation, whether it's in a podcast or on a session with a client, but these types of conversations are occurring for me.
Mm.
And I know there's, yeah, again, so many women that go through challenging situations, in that romantic partnership way. Do you have any advice, if we're having that, but it feels so good and I do feel good in my body and it feels so open and oh my God, it's that deliciousness of just, it's that, so, maybe a soul connection or a heart connection or whatever the words are that we use that's beyond, just the physical orgasm, which is also fabulous, but this is that deeper place. But how can we, in that deliciousness and ecstasy, still tap into those parts of us that might be saying, but just, maybe do this once because it's so good, but maybe this is, or not even, or maybe take that energy into a pleasure practice on your own, or do it once or do it a few times, but just listen and feel into because this is actually a red flag. How can we perhaps avoid what you and I went, the path we went down for other women that are listening now?
Mm. So, one of the first things to understand is that the love driven being is often experiencing the world through, am I loved? Am I loved? Am I connected? Does this feel good? Those types of questions. Now, when we place those connections externally, am I loved? Am I connected? This feels good. They're kind of placed in somebody else's lap. That in itself is its own problem. So the medicine for that is the embodiment of love. When a woman can do her own embodiment practices to connect with her feelings, to allow the release and the excavation of past hurts, to allow her access to pleasure, to sensuality, to sexuality, to really tap into the source of love that she already is. Each and every single one of us can touch that greater source of love that is already there at our core. And when we know that place and we're nourished by that place internally, it helps with the discernment. It also means that when we connect with somebody else, instead of asking, am I loved? Do they like me? Do they want me? We stay listening to ourselves rather than putting those questions in the other person's lap. If I'm embodying love, then does my capacity for love increase in this person's presence, or does it diminish in this person's presence?
Such a beautiful answer. Am I loved? Yeah. Yeah, and that gives you the ability, as you were saying before, to discern the difference.
Yeah.
And then if we go down a path, oh sorry, then we learn and forgive and then move on into that discernment because we do sometimes make mistakes or
yeah.
a mistake, as one of my friends says. Mistake. We tried again. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the real key to it is the embodiment of love, because when a woman knows how to nourish and fill herself up and love herself and generate pleasure and sensuality and sexuality in her body, then she won't compromise for crumbs with a man. She won't compromise for less than feeling full and expansive, because she knows that that is her nature.
Yeah, so beautiful. And if we look at, some of the tools that you mentioned just briefly, the word tools, can you maybe give us, one or two practices or processes that we can use to either start that process or cultivate a deeper level of connection with ourselves?
Typically with women, I'll start with some form of movement, because our bodies, it's like they're designed to move, to feel, to breathe, to express, to allow. It's a way of displaying and revealing our feelings through moving our bodies. And we need to be able to do that for ourselves. But it also becomes part of the art of sacred intimacy, that when a woman can display her feelings through her body in a way that includes range and receptivity and openness, she becomes both an inspiration and an invitation for the appropriate sort of man, but she also filters out the kind of man who doesn't have the capacity to meet that kind of power in her body. So how a woman can start, and I like to make the distinction between movement and dance, because oftentimes women have danced a lot in their life, so their body goes, this is how I move when I dance. This is what dancing is.
Yes.
Back to habit, routine, identity when we do dance. But movement, I'll do it now just to breathe, as though I'm breathing and opening right through the front of my body and softening the front of my body, and then allow the body to move organically, naturally, freely, in a way that a woman's allowing that flow of love and sensuality to bubble up from the inside. And then she can also add sound to that. So the sound might go, so there's a sense that with the sound, we're opening up the central channel of the body. With the movement, we're unraveling stored tensions. With the breath, we're allowing more life and more love to move through us.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for allowing us to witness that, because that's a very vulnerable act, to move your body and share with us your expression, your throat chakra, your voice. So I thank you. That was beautiful to witness. I actually am, well, I was going to say am a dancer, but I don't really identify, because I was kind of average at it. But I did dance from the age of 3 to 13, ballet and jazz every single week. And then I actually went and did Latin, and I did, even some belly dancing and things. I'm just curious, just again, with my background in dancing, are there certain moves? Because I'm just thinking like the sensuality of belly dancing with the figure eight, and also, things like Latin. Like I love Latin because I love to move my body and move my hips in that way. Is that a similar kind of practice or movement to what you're talking about, or is that just because, from my eye that doesn't know this process, it looks similar, but it might just be very, very different?
So what you refer to in terms of the figure of eight in belly dance is a very primal movement and does connect us to the earth. So there is very much something in a woman's body that responds to that figure of eight. It connects us to the earth, it grounds us, but it also opens up our pelvic bowl. And because of the way we've lived disconnected from sensuality and sexuality, a woman connecting with her pelvic bowl, connecting with sensuality and sexuality, it's a beautiful, nourishing gift for herself, as well as a gift for anybody that she may be in partnership with. So there's certainly something very beautiful and powerful about belly dance and any of those forms that include the sensual figure of eight type movements through the pelvis. Specifically, what I'm referring to in movement practice is doing something that's organic, that doesn't have a routine or a habit to it. So each woman has her own unique opening, then her own unique medicine for what her body needs. And there are different ways to breathe that will amplify and support that opening of a woman's body. It's also very interesting that you mentioned Latin dance, because one of the things we see in Latin dance is that there's a man's role and there's a woman's role. Man's role is often to lead, woman's role is to follow, but the beauty, the color, the sensuality all happens in the woman's following. Like, he's creating the structure, he's leading, she's the color, the expression, the beauty, the flow, the energy. He's merely holding the shape, but she provides the flowers and the blossoming within that shape. And that's what we use in sacred intimacy as well, that in order for sexual spark or polarity to exist, we need to amplify the differences between two people. And what we see a lot of in today's culture is that men and women are striving to be more equal, and in that process striving to be more same. But in the world of same, sexual spark diminishes and in many cases dies off completely.
Such a good point. And this is why I was so excited to have you on, because I knew that you would be enlightening us with some amazing words of wisdom. And I could not agree more. It's almost like, and you didn't use these words, but a place for some traditional, men and women dynamic in terms of in the bedroom and in terms of cultivating that intimacy. And perhaps that's where the tools come in, because there are a lot of women that are now earning the same or even earning more than their husbands or partners. There's the rise of the divine feminine, where there's a lot of women that are very empowered, and there's a lot of men that I feel are very confused in this current climate. And I often say I'm a mum to a beautiful young man who's 16, and as much as I am very much into women's empowerment and divine feminine, to me divine feminine is about the feminine energy of love and compassion and forgiveness, and also strength and nurturing, and that is for men as much as it is for women. It's for every being. So I'm so glad that you shared this, because I would love to leave a world behind where women are empowered and doing their thing and earning their money and standing on their own 2 feet, and they're beautiful and they're sexually fulfilled and all those wonderful things, and equality in the workplace, and the list goes on. And also that men are connected to their sexuality. Men are understanding how to engage with this new breed of woman, if you like, so that they can have amazing, earth-shattering sex as well, and beautiful healing spiritual experiences, and thrive in their own careers and businesses too. So let's talk for a moment about the men and the boys, because do you also work, I know that it's you and your husband that do this together, so I assume you work with couples, and also do you work with men by themselves too?
Yes, we work with individual men, individual women, we work with couples. We also have regular men's circles and women's circles. So we're working with people in a variety of different ways. And some of the tools that we adopted from our teachers, because Rod and I had become aware that in some ways our culture had outgrown some of what was available through the lens of masculine and feminine. There was a sense of some of the masculine and feminine teachings created dogma, prescriptiveness, and limitation. And then oftentimes in the work I was doing before I was with Rod, what I would see is that people would then weaponize those terms in their intimate relationships, like he's not masculine enough and she's not feminine enough. And Rod and I were actively looking for, what's the next evolution of this work? Where do we want to take it that will serve our culture and that will create more expansion, more growth, more richness in relationships, and being really aware that, I had a background as an accountant, so I had a really strong masculine side, and Rod used to be a hairdresser, so he has a really strong feminine side, but so it didn't serve him to suppress his feminine, and it didn't serve me to suppress my masculine. But our teachers who we've worked with for many years now, they adopted these 3 ways of relating. And instead of masculine and feminine, the terminology is alpha. So alpha representing one ultimately. It's the first letter of the Greek alphabet and means one. So in that way, it's representing consciousness. Now, we are all consciousness. So we all have alpha. And then that alpha also includes our structure, direction, leadership, those kind of things. Then omega is the last letter in the Greek alphabet and refers to the totality of all. So anything that's not consciousness is omega. The body, form, sound, movement, expression is all omega. So then we can see how everyone has a body. So everybody has omega. Everybody has consciousness. Everybody has alpha. But then we get to go, within a relationship, there are times when it serves to be in one mode or the other, just as the reference to Latin dancing. So I'll give you a brief run through of the 3 ways of relating. Let's say if Rod and I are working on a project together, which we do a lot of because we work together, we're creating online programs at the moment. So we're writing, editing, refining, making videos and, working with timelines and all of that. And so working in that way together, we're both adopting alpha. We're each other's teammate. We're working on projects. We're creating direction. We're achieving things. We're getting things done. So alpha can be really productive and supportive for projects, creating a business, renovating a house, raising children. The challenge with alpha mode is that it can turn into, I want to do it my way. No, I want to do it my way. I want to do it my way. It can be butting of heads can happen. But also when it's alpha, and we see a lot of this in today's world, that's where people don't want to have sex because there's no sexual spark there.
Right.
Then second way of relating is omega. So this is like, let's say it's a Sunday and we're like, Rod and I could be hanging out and it's like, let's go to the beach and have a walk and we'll get some yummy food. And isn't it so beautiful to be out in nature? And let's go for a swim and let's go home and watch a movie and hang out on the couch and love our pets and just have a beautiful, nourishing, juicy time together in that way. So the omega feels good. It feels loving. It's super nourishing. It's restful. But the downside of it can be that direction. There's no direction. You can kind of go round and round in circles and ultimately none of the things on the to-do list get done. Also, it's not a sexual space because it's just like we're same. We're connected, loving and close, but there's no differences.
Right.
But then at some point, if one of us goes, we've been same for so long, what would it be to amplify the opposite? So in this instance, it might be Rod that goes, okay, I'm going to embody alpha. And so for him to embody alpha, he might become more still. He'll breathe more deeply. He'll allow his voice to get a bit deeper. He'll amplify the qualities of consciousness, stillness, nothingness, structure. And then as I feel him make that shift, his alpha becoming more potent, more magnified in that way, then sensuality, openness, receptivity, I can breathe him in. Then all of a sudden we're different. And when we're in that space of the differences, sexual spark comes alive. So either partner can shift the dynamic at any moment in time depending on what the medicine is that would serve the relationship.
Amazing. And I imagine that this is, whether it's a same-sex couple as well, because it's energy that we're speaking about here. It's not gender. So we embody
Exactly.
these parts. Yeah.
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 And just to give you another example, Rod's on his way to a 10-day meditation retreat today, and naturally feeling anxious, as any of us would be when we enter into a big experience like that. And he rang me before, and so he, in many ways, he's in the omega expression of his feelings, and so I'm on the other end of the phone holding that alpha space for him, just reflecting back to him, being there for his feelings. So either partner can embody alpha, either partner can embody omega at any given time. It's really a matter of treating the relationship and as a matter of art. Making love becomes art. It's like, what will serve my partner? What will serve love to flow? What will serve closeness and intimacy between us? And then being able to navigate with awareness in order to be of service to each other. And then
Beautiful.
it means that the synergy of the two people creates something so much more beautiful. Or let's say the name of your podcast, it's like it's bigger and it's beautiful, more beautiful, because there's a sense of playing these energies to create something even greater than the individuals could create alone.
Yeah, so gorgeous. Absolutely beautiful expression. So good. And is there a place like have you written a book? Is there a blog post or something where we can go to and I can add it into the show notes around the alpha and omega and the things that you've been speaking about today on this session?
Yes, we have a podcast episode specifically around love driven and purpose driven. Typically, women tend to be more love driven, men tend to be more purpose driven. So there's that one podcast episode I can share with you. We also do have resources on our blog. I can't remember specifically, though, if there's one that refers to the 3 ways of relating, but I'll send you links for our blog and our podcast so you can
Yes,
share
that would be
those.
amazing. Thank you so much.
Mm.
Can you share with us, have you got in mind, obviously with privacy for those who you work with, but either an individual or a couple that you've just seen this, beautiful transformation from when they came to see you to when they finished off their engagement with you?
Mm, mm. There's many examples, and probably there's a more recent example that comes into my awareness would be of a couple who Rod and I worked with together, and seeing them over the course of 3 months, where they were at the beginning to where they are at the end of their 3 months, is completely different. They don't look like the same couple, definitely not having the same relationship. There's so much more flow of love and sex and connection and alignment for the future and capacity to really see and hear and feel and value and honor each other. It's like all those beautiful things that people long for in their relationship, are feeling trusted and loved and valued and appreciated and seen and heard. During the 3 months where Rod and I supported this couple, I've seen them use the tools to really embody all of that. So their relationship is totally different than when they started with us.
Amazing. And please remind me, do you also work online so you can see clients from all over the world, I assume?
Yes. So we do individual and couple sessions online. People can choose to work with myself or with Rod or with both of us. And then we also have our Intimacy Oasis membership, which gives people the option of attending either the women's circle or the men's circle. And there's 2 of those each month. But then we also have a Saturday morning practice session, which includes meditation and movement, specifically for the embodiment of the alpha and the omega qualities, so that people become really well practiced at being able to have what we call energetic agility, moving between alpha and omega in a heartbeat as needed. So Rod and I love offering those Saturday morning sessions because it gives the people in our community that chance once a week to do the practices that we use to change our lives.
How beautiful. And again, that's all run also online,
Yeah.
those group sessions. Yeah,
Yeah.
amazing. Okay, I would love to ask you,
Mm.
um, what does playing bigger, playing beautiful mean to you, Martina?
Mm. Playing bigger, playing beautiful. First of all, if I look at playing bigger, there's a sense of not needing to chop off or hide or compromise any of who I am, to have access to the full range of my humanity, my love, my sensuality, my sexuality, my spirituality, to be all of that. That's the playing bigger piece. And the playing beautiful is loving all of this, loving my range, loving my humanity, embracing and accepting it, and being able to offer the same gift to others, whether that's Rod, whether it's my clients, my community, my friends, my family. Loving and accepting everything is the playing bigger, playing beautiful.
Oh, such a good answer. I'm just taking all of that in. That's so good. It's just so, so beautiful. And it's, yeah. And it just brings me so much joy to be able to share this, sacred part of me because I had the energy of the podcast for so many years. And then because of my own self-doubt and confusion and trauma and journey and tall poppy syndrome and just all the things that you kind of go through, I just didn't do it. And then eventually just late last year, I thought, that's it. We're doing it. And I don't mind how it looks or how it turns out. I just really want to show up and share that this is me and this is the platform and the right people will show. And they truly did, such as yourself. And it's just such a beautiful sacred space and so much love and respect that pours through when I hit record. And I just feel so immensely grateful to be able to bring this out. Yeah, so good. Thank you so much. Let
Mm.
me share with you the screen, and I would love to ask you out of the six selves, the framework that I've also got behind me on the banner for anyone who's watching us on YouTube, just to find out what is your favorite self and why. So
Mm.
I'm just going to share that, and I can scroll down. So that's the overview at the top there,
Yes.
and then we've got the first. Well, you can see the last one there as well, which we're very fitting, but that might not be the one that's your favorite. Actually, there
Yeah.
we go.
So I did have a look at this in
Mm.
advance, and I was like, oh, of course it's the sexual self because I'm a sexual being, and part of my purpose is to empower people around having healthy, loving, sacred sexual experiences. And then I'm like, oh, but the spiritual self. And so I had this like dilemma of like, oh, sexual self, spiritual self. And then I realized it's like, it's a loop. Instead of being linear, this is a loop. So the sexual and the spiritual self, my experience is that those two elements feed each other and both are necessary for the wholeness of humanity. And it's often sexual part that gets cut off or the spiritual part that gets cut off. But actually that is part of the embrace for me. So I would say my favorite is actually two, sexual and spiritual, but very much I see them feeding each other.
Yeah, and almost sort of as you're speaking, it's almost like that infinity sign or the eight, again, it's because I
Exactly.
see it the same way. And there was a reason why I did the spiritual one first, because it could have been the other way around. But to me, the foundational piece is, well, it's the heart. That's what I sort of really express and define my spirituality through, but it's whatever it is for every being. And then, it's sexual self, not that it's last, but it just did fit in nicely at the end there. But yes, the spiritual one had to come first as our
Mm.
foundation. I have one last lucky question for you, if that's okay. And that is, what
Sure.
advice do you have for others who are creating a business that serves both the world and their heart?
Mm. Beautiful question. Beautiful question. And I would say it's to listen to what calls you. Because in order to serve others, we need to be true to what calls us. So it's like, be true to what calls us, to listen, to feel, and let that ignite our sense of purpose and serving. And from that place, everything can align to support the person in service.
And for anyone who's watching YouTube, you can see Martina's sort of using her hands, and you were sort of very much focused on solar plexus, sacral, and root chakra. That the sort of the feeling in the very much the base chakras. And for anyone who can't see, I wanted to just share because it just felt important to reflect back what you were sharing from that way as well. Martina, is there anything else that you wish to share with our audience?
I think the thing I'd love to leave people with for women and men is that the embodiment of love can be as simple as slowing down and paying attention to your breath, so that you're centering your awareness inside of your body and being connected to yourself. And then from that place, everything else takes care of itself. So slow down, breathe, feel.
Beautiful sharing.
Thank
you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you for having me on your podcast. Really, really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you so much.
If you resonate with what we're about and you're watching us on YouTube, please subscribe. If you're listening to us, please leave a review and share the episode with someone who you believe could benefit from what has been discussed. Thank you so much for your support. See you soon. The information provided on this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered medical, health, or financial advice. Always consult with a qualified health professional or financial advisor before making any decisions related to your personal health or finances.